Jenna will be able to answer any of your administrative questions, and I will be able to assist with your clinical questions. So all you need to do is fill out this little form here and we will come straight back to you. I think all of you now have Jenna's email and you all have my email, and you are very welcome to email us directly as well if you have any problems. Please don't hesitate. We are really hoping for an open communication between you and us, and we are here to support you in whatever way we can so that you can optimize your learning from the case studies. Alrighty, so we'll go into the adult weight management case. All of the cases that we have on the Nutrition Care Pro website are laid out in the same way. They are comprised of the same components mainly. Some of them have additional components like an electronic health record or a home health record, but by and large, this is what you're going to see when you land on one of the case studies. You have the welcome page, and the welcome page is comprised of a series of videos which will allow you to learn how to navigate the website. And I would strongly encourage you to work your way through these videos before you begin your case. So here are your little videos here. The first one is on meeting your client. The second is on how to make videos. Now, unless you're using this in the classroom with your lecturers, I wouldn't worry too much about that. In some of our universities, the students are encouraged to practice their communication skills with their patients by making videos where they're pretending to correspond with the patient or with the doctor or with the patient's family. They then upload those videos into the system and they are graded by the academic. And so I think in each of your cases, that will not be required. The case activities video takes you through the various activities that are attached to each patient. The mind map video explains how to use the mind map. I'm going to do that today with you. And then again, using the classroom is very much for those students who are using the cases in the classroom. So these two videos, you don't need to worry about unless your lecturers decide to use the cases this semester. Some more information down here about each component of the case. I'm going to take you through that today, so you may not need to watch those videos. Time management. I'll just let you know that for most students who are embarking on a case for the very first time, we encourage them to allow 7 hours. And by the time they have memorized much of the work that's in here that they're going to be required to draw on when they're practitioners, a case will take around 3 hours. So in the early stages, there's a great deal of learning that goes on, necessary learning for you to bed down the nutrition care process and terminology, and also for you to bed down some of the theory that is within the medical nutrition therapy realm. National competency standards for dietitians. Now this will let you know which of the competencies are ticked off in each of our cases. So it's quite an important document if you're wanting to know where you're standing with your competencies. And here is the National Competency Standards for Australia, and then your ethical reminder. These cases are designed to be used by only one person, and we strongly discourage the sharing of access among students. So your ethical reminder is sitting down here. Okay, so back up to the top of this page and into the learning outcomes. Now, as I said, this is the simplest of our cases, and we are looking here at adult weight management in the context of your patient, Mr. Robertson. He's a 65-year-old man, and he's recently been to see his doctor about weight gain. And in the background of his medical history is an increased risk. Well, he actually has the beginnings of hypertension. Now, this patient you follow over a 9-year period and 4 cases. So the next thing the next clinical condition that this patient has is hypertension. That's our case 2. He then develops type 2 diabetes. That's our case 3. Finally, 9 years down the track, he's diagnosed with prostate cancer and he ends up malnourished. So you as the dietitian will see him over that 9-year period of his life if you have the first 4 cases. Wherever we can in Nutrition Care Pro, we are using real life patients. So your experiences are as true to life as they can possibly be. In America, the dietetic students are required to do 1,000 clinical hours, and our cases have been accredited there for 130 clinical hours. So the students who are on placement and perhaps not accessing the kinds of caseload that they need to tick off their competencies, come onto the Nutrition Care Pro website and accumulate their clinical hours. We're not at that point in Australia. We're working towards that. But just so you know, it gives you an indication of just how realistic the cases are that they've been accredited in that way. Okay, so your learning objectives are spelled out in every case on this page. Very simple. You're asked to describe overweight and obesity. You're asked to describe the associated risks and risk factors, assess food and nutrition history, and I'm going to take you through that in some detail. And once we have bedded down the assessment process for adult weight management, you will see how it carries through to assessment for hypertension, assessment for type 2 diabetes. Once you have those in place and you've memorized much of that, you're in a really good spot to begin practicing. You'll be asked to assess energy and macronutrient intake, the nutrition status of the patient, estimate the energy requirements. In other cases, of course, you're asked to estimate the protein requirements, the sodium requirements, the potassium requirements, etc. We are just looking at energy in this case, and then you're assessing the knowledge, beliefs, and attitudes of the patient. Very, very important in determining how you're going to approach your interventions with the patient. The next point 4, is about nutrition diagnosis, which I know students really struggle with. So we can take time working out your nutrition diagnosis for the patient perhaps not today. Today is more an overview, but I'm very happy to come back once you've had a chance to work through some of the activities and we can focus on that. And then nutrition interventions. The final thing that we must do is the monitoring and evaluation plan for the patient, and I'll show you the resources that we have around that. Any questions so far? Okay, in every one of our cases, we offer at least one perspective. The more complex the patient, the more perspectives we offer. So if we have comorbidities, then we will, and say the patient has 4 or 5 other clinical conditions, then we will give you 5 perspectives for that patient. In this case, we only have the adult weight management perspective. These dot points are hyperlinked. So if you want to learn about the first point, we always define the clinical condition. And then if you want to learn about the major risk factors for the clinical condition, we would just click on that. We're a bit slow. I think because we've got the this program running, it's slow. So I'm just going to scroll down for you. They are hard. Here are the major risk factors for obesity. We have the medications that cause weight gain. We have the typical comorbidities for obesity, and then we have diagnosis. So ways to measure body fat, the body mass index, BMI classification for overweight and obesity is here. Down to waist circumference and the recommended ranges for waist circumference, and then a summary of intervention information. When you see these bands of orange, click on them and they're going to take you through to additional information that is very important. This is the information that dietitians carry in their minds and have memorized. which you may or may not be aware of. And I would encourage you to take a very close look at this information and try and bed it down. There are literally hundreds of these practice considerations throughout our case studies, and they affect the way your decision-making rolls when you're with your patient. They are important pieces of information. Here's another one, reading the documentation of nutrition care process. Your references are here for the perspective. Now, the next thing that you'll find in the case studies are our mind maps. And these are very detailed pieces of information. There's a video there that you can watch to learn. Thanks, Jen. Make it easier. You can learn a little bit about the mind map there. To access the mind map, the mind map breaks down the nutrition care process steps. So assessment, diagnosis, nutrition intervention, monitoring and evaluation, breaks them down and exposes, it reveals to you the different aspects of each one of those steps that the dietitian needs to know for the clinical condition that they are looking at in the case study. So as you might be aware, in the nutrition care process terms and codes, there are thousands of terms and codes. Not all of them will apply to the condition that you are studying. So we've eliminated all of those that we don't need for this case, and we're just focusing on the ones that you will need. So we're in assessment at the moment. We're going to click on food and nutrition related history here. These are the terms and codes that you're going to need for the assessment of your patient when you're studying their food intake. As I said, it varies according to the clinical condition. So for type 2 diabetes, for example, there will be a strong emphasis in your nutrition assessment and the food and nutrient intake component on simple carbohydrate intake, the quantity of carbohydrate consumed, and the glycemic index of those foods. Here we are really focused on the energy intake of the patient. And so you will work your way through these questions. You turn this information into questions when you're in an assessment situation with your patient. So the first thing that you're going to be looking at is their food and beverage intake. And you would be asking questions around their fluid intake. For example, are you drinking soft drinks? Do you have fruit juice at breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Do you drink sports drinks while you're exercising? You're gathering information about that excess sugar that might be going into their diet. Then moving into their food intake, you're having a look at their 5 food group intake, and you're assessing in your mind whether that is in excessive or inadequate to the established recommendations for food intake. Moving further on, we're looking at the different types of food in a diet. Is your patient having high energy, savory, takeout, processed foods, and so forth? So look, we have a lot of detail here where we are identifying those aspects of an assessment with your patient that you need to be covering to gather the right kind of information. There is absolutely 0 point in sitting down with your patient and saying, tell me what you eat. That's going to take you nowhere, and you're going to have a huge amount of guesswork from your patient, and then you're going to be having a huge amount of guesswork trying to do a nutrition analysis. It's very important that we are much more, we take a more detailed look at the patient's diet, and we really drill down and that we're asking the right questions to get the right information. For example, with some patients, I'll say to them, can you describe to me what you have in your shopping trolley each week? And oh my goodness, the picture that they paint of their shopping trolley, or I'll ask them to take a picture of their shopping trolley and send it to me. The picture that the shopping trolley paints is completely different to what they've told me in an oral nutrition assessment. All right, so moving down the list, we're going to move into the medications that the patient takes. Very important question, because some of those medications might trigger overweight and obesity. For example, antidepressants lithium, antipsychotic medication. Then we move into the patient's knowledge, beliefs, and attitudes, another extremely important component of your nutrition assessment. Because if the fundamental knowledge is not there, or the patient's attitude is not right in terms of making changes, or they're not ready to make change, or they don't have the knowledge and skills to make change, we can't move ahead. So very important for you to begin to gauge this aspect of their of where they're at. Then we have you have a read through all of this at your leisure. We focus on physical activity and function, so that's the frequency, duration, intensity of their exercise, and then into the anthropometric data that you will be gathering for a patient with weight issues. Obviously height, obviously weight. You'll be considering their frame size, their body mass index, and even body compartment estimates. Into their biochemical data. Now we know that patients who are overweight are at risk of a number of comorbidities, including hyperlipidemia leading to coronary heart disease. So this is they are also at risk, depending, they have abdominal obesity. They will be at risk of type 2 diabetes. And so these are the kinds of things that you would be looking out for in the patient's blood profile. And so forth. This list, we're only halfway through, but take time to read through this list of assessment information and familiarize yourself with it. And you will begin to see patterns in this that repeat from one clinical condition to the next. Now into nutrition diagnosis. We have the domains for nutrition diagnosis. And we provide you with some examples of the terms and codes that you might use when you are diagnosing your patient. The codes are there because some universities like to identify codes with students. They're used in medical charts, in hospitals, for funding purposes. But for your purposes, I would say completely ignore the codes and just focus on the terms. Everything that is in black, all the font in black for assessment, diagnosis, intervention, monitoring, and evaluation has come directly from the nutrition care process and terminology. We have a license with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics to use their terms and codes. Everything that is in blue is that information that an experienced dietitian would be carrying in their heads. It has come from the scientific literature. So the first of these terms and codes for diagnosis is intake, where in the case of adult weight management, we would be looking at their energy balance, their fluid intake, possibly their bioactive substance intake. Are they having excessive alcohol? That can lead to the problem. Their nutrient intake, we would be interested in their fat and cholesterol intake. We've put cholesterol in there because there is a very, very small percentage of individuals who are cholesterol sensitive. By and large, people are not cholesterol sensitive, and they can eat as much, well, they can eat reasonable amounts of cholesterol and it won't have an impact on their risk of coronary heart disease. Down into the clinical domain, where we would be looking at food and medication interaction, and then the diagnosis of overweight and obesity, which is commonly used for overweight and obese patients, but it is not always the right diagnosis for overweight and obese patients. In fact, sometimes the diagnosis has to do with knowledge, beliefs, and attitudes. They may simply not be ready for lifestyle change. And then down into some examples of PES statements that you might use for your weight management patients. The next thing we look at is nutrition intervention in terms of the terms and codes. And you'll notice in nutrition intervention, a lot of blue rather than a lot of black. So we provide you with an abundance of information from the dietetic literature about how to treat the condition. We show you how much energy, how much protein, the alcohol recommendations for patients, the physical activity recommendations. There is loads of information in there. There's your protein requirements, which you can draw upon when you're coming up with a nutrition intervention. And then finally, in the same format, we have monitoring and evaluation. Any questions at this point? Riley has left us because he's seen all this before. I think he didn't need to go through it a third time. Now we have the resources for you to read. Just holler if you have any questions. Here we have identified critical readings that will benefit you in your approach to treatment. We include the notable systematic reviews from around the world. We have incorporated the health at every size approach information. This is not necessarily the approach that we take in this case. We have a patient here who he's overweight. He wants to stop that. He has made a decision that he wants to reduce his weight. So we've listened to that. He also has a background of hypertension, and you'll see from his body shape that he is predisposed to type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome. So in this case, we have elected to empower him to maintain his weight initially so that he can stabilize. And then over time, our aim and goal, his goal, is to reduce his weight. But there are other patients who will come to you, and we absolutely know for a fact from the literature that 90% of patients who come to you for weight loss will not be successful in the long term. We call it the Nike tick, where in the first 3 to 6 months, they will lose weight if they're on an energy deficit diet with exercise. And then in the next 5 years, they're going to gain that weight back and more some. So we know that energy deficit diets generally will not work for people. And that's why we would call upon the health at every size approach, which may or may not lead to weight loss, but it may, and often does, lead to changes in the patient's lifestyle, which bring on, which are healthier behaviours and behaviours which lead to longevity. So feel free to have a read through those resources, very interesting part of the weight loss literature. And then we have the public health strategies, resources for clinicians that come from the various academies and other useful tools. Now, if you're using this case in the classroom, you might find that your lecturer will add to this information. There is, as you know, an abundance of literature. Finally, we're into the patient story. You get to meet, and we begin to, you meet him in person through these videos, so you can begin your nutrition-focused physical findings when you see the patient. The videos may not come up on the screen again because of the lag that we have here, but if I was looking at my laptop, I would see a picture of the patient with each of these videos. You should be able to see that yourselves when you open this page. And then we have a description of where the patient's at and what he's ready to achieve. This will give you his background medical information, a little bit about his smoking history, his family history, and it's important that you start to gather your assessment information at this point, and you might map out just a little, what would you call it, like what you would use in your practice with the patient, where you would have, what do you call it, Jen? A template where you can start recording the background information around the patient. Just draw the information out, write it down, because you're going to use this when you prepare a chart entry in the activities. Here you can see that his blood pressure is slightly up. There's his weight at 90 kilograms, both are higher than previous recordings. Very important that you click on this part of the story, which takes you through to a page that the patient has actually completed to describe where he's at this point in time. This will give you an overview of his eating patterns, but more than that, and his physical activity, more than that, it gives you an understanding of what the patient, where the patient believes his knowledge is at in terms of the medical condition, and other nutrition-related health problems, the health consequences of his medical condition, whether he sees any benefit from making nutrition-related change. He's kind of in the middle there, isn't he? He's not too sure. He's standing on the fence. Yeah. Is he, you know, can he describe the level of barriers to adopting new behaviours? This kind of background information that you as a dietitian would be collecting through assessment. And it's really important that I think you bed down those criteria so that when you are working with your patients, you're going to draw on that. You need to have an understanding of these specific components of the patient's knowledge in order to move forward and write successful goals with your patient. And it also helps a great deal if you have your patient scale their belief about themselves to do with those criteria. And you might just, as part of the template that you have, your
resource as part of your resource.
Yeah, why am I having trouble finding the word for that?
Monday morning.
It's your clinical practice template. Have this table and ask those questions. Monday morning, you sat here and had coffee yet.
Yeah.
In every one of our cases, you will find that. Important too that you have a listen to the interaction of the patient with the dietitian. We have a series of videos down here which provides background information. And then we move into the patient's diet history, which is a little more detailed than what you've seen. So this is where the dietitian has done a deep dive and really discovered what the patient is eating, not just breakfast, lunch and dinner, but also socially, you know, their occasional food intake. And finally, we're almost there, folks, we have the activities. Now, for all of our cases, there are 22 activities, as many as 24 activities. These are activities that are assigned in class for students to work through with at a snail's pace originally, so that they bed down the nutrition care process in a practical sense. The first thing that you're asked to do is a nutrition analysis of the patient's diet. We provide you with a spreadsheet here that has background formula. There are algorithms imposed in this spreadsheet that will do the busy work for you. They'll do the calculations. All you need to do is add the serving sizes for your patient for each of these. And then this will calculate the energy, protein, fat, and carbohydrate intake of your patient down here. Here is your ready reckoner to allow you to do a manual calculation, a quick nutrition analysis. And I say to students that by the end of 3 or 4 cases, you really ought to be able to do a quick nutrition analysis of your patient's diet within 10 minutes. That's what you're aiming for. That's the practice goal. So the patient will sit and you will do an assessment with them. It might take 15 minutes or so to bring forth the information that you're looking for. And then as they are describing that information, you are calculating their energy, protein, fat, carbohydrate, fiber, sodium, potassium, whatever it is that you need to be looking at specifically for this patient. And that whole thing, probably including the assessment, once you're practiced at it, will take a maximum of 15 minutes, 10 minutes if you are just doing a calculation, a nutrition analysis on its own. And down the track, I'll be running classes on Ready Reckoner experience. And so if you would like to practice your Ready Reckoner skills with me, I'm super keen for you to join in there. The next thing that we will do is have a look at the diet in terms of the 5 food groups, and then we do a comparison of this patient's diet against the dietary guidelines. We plot the patient's BMI, and as I said, you're looking at this patient over a 9-year period, so you end up with a lovely plot of his weight over time, where at the end, when he's malnourished, you can see his weight kind of plummeting over a period of months. Then you calculate his energy and protein needs. You look at the impact of his physical activity, you assess his knowledge, beliefs, and attitudes, and so forth. Now, if you don't want to do all of that detail, you can come down and just simply do a chart entry. And all of those components will feature in your chart entry. Let me see if I can find it at the end here. So here's the progress note. This is what you would keep on file if you were in private practice or if you were working in a hospital. It's slow. But what we're not seeing here is the template. Let's go up here.
Templates? Is it one of those? Yes.
There we go. There we are. That's what we want. So you're keeping the age, weight, BMI, etc. of your patient. You can add to this and put historical data in place. You're having a look at his food nutrition related history, anthropometric and biochemical measures, nutrition focused physical findings. So for this patient, you've just seen a headshot, but you can see that he's carrying a lot of weight through his jowls. It's an indication that he has upper body weight, which absolutely does. He has abdominal obesity. If he had a ruddy complexion, you might write that in. And so in order to work out what characteristics you would be putting into each of these components, I would recommend that you come back to the mind maps and you have a look in them. So if we're doing, okay, so let's take nutrition focused physical findings, for example. Go back into your mind map, go back into assessment. Go down to nutrition focused physical findings here, and then have a look at these criteria and see if any of these apply to your patient. So the first of these, this patient says to you, my clothes don't fit correctly. So this would be one. Excess subcutaneous fat is another. Central adiposity is another. What else has he got? Digestive system. He's not complaining of any of this, but certainly some patients would. He's not complaining of any of this. Again, some patients would. So use this as a guide to what, and then the blood pressure, vital signs. Definitely pop that in nutrition focused physical findings. Use your mind map to guide you in your assessment of the patient. Sorry, this is slow. It's just because we've got the meeting tool running. The next thing that you will do in your chart entry is write a nutrition diagnosis. And in some patients, there won't just simply be one diagnosis. There may be 3 or 4, but it's up to you to prioritize. You use your reasoning skills to prioritize which you're going to focus on. Clearly, in most patients who are obese, one of the PES statements will involve excess energy intake. In this patient, remember when I showed you that the description that the patient put together of his diet and his understanding of his knowledge? He said that he was kind of sitting on the fence regarding whether he wanted to move forward his lifestyle changes. So another diagnosis that you would put into play for this patient would be something around his knowledge, beliefs, and attitudes, that he's not ready for diet and lifestyle change. And this completely changes your intervention approach. Very important that you secure the correct nutrition diagnosis so that you're treating the correct thing. If you've just got high energy intake, the simple change that you might make as the dietitian to the patient's diet could be taking all the Coca-Cola out of their diet, suggesting that they move to Diet Coke. If you've got a knowledge, belief, and attitude PES statement, you're going to be focusing on, if it's knowledge, their knowledge and what that means for their health, and how improving their knowledge is going to encourage them to make the necessary changes in their diet. If you've got, say, a biochemical PES statement, something like high lipid levels, then you're going to be focused on changing their diet to change their blood lipid levels. So we will do sessions on nutrition diagnosis that allow you to hone your skills on making the correct PES statement. But each one of these cases allows you to practice your PES statement. The next part of the case study allows you to write a nutrition intervention for your patient. Again, you would go back to the mind maps and have a look at the intervention section and see which of those intervention suggestions applies to your patient here. And then finally, you write monitoring and evaluation plan, and you ensure that you're bringing your patient back in for a second consultation. We know with, sorry, I'm just going to find this progress note. Here we are. We know with weight management patients, they need around about 22 to 24 sessions with a dietitian or other health practitioner to bring about change, and meaningful change that will last them in the long term. So having contact with a health professional around their weight over a 1 to 2 year period with regular treatment sessions makes all the difference to their success. So part of your language with your patient is working that next consultation in with them. So, you'd be saying things like, and in our next consultation, we're going to be covering the really important aspect of blah. And when I see you next week, let's take a look at this. If you don't begin to work that into their mindset during your consultation, they'll leave. And I can tell you from experience, they won't come back. It makes all the difference when you begin the conversation with them from the outset of your very first appointment. And then finally, monitoring and evaluation is the last part of your progress note. So print this out, keep it on hand, and it's well worth, memorizing something like this ADAM consultation template, because it forms the basis of every consultation that you will have with your patients. You will be adapting this, I imagine, Zini, in the classroom, and Griffith University may have a different way of laying out a nutrition progress note, but this is certainly a lovely starting point for you. Now, do you have any questions about this so far? All good? Okay, that's great. So now I want to show you the second most important part of the website besides the contact page. And that is the answers for adult weight management. They're hidden away all the way down at the end of the activity page. So come in here, come all the way down here, and here is your answer guide. The answers to every one of those activities is listed there. And this will guide you forward with this patient if you have the hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and malnutrition. The patient's diet doesn't change dramatically for the next 2 cases, but your approach changes completely. In the next case, in hypertension, you'll be looking at his sodium and potassium intake in addition to his energy intake. And in the type 2 diabetes case, you focus very much on his carbohydrate intake, and you participate in developing, well, you look at his exchange intake. So his 15-gram carbohydrate exchange intake and the pattern of exchanges over the course of a day. And then in malnutrition, we are back to energy, but we look at it in a very different light. So this is a detailed document. It covers around about 30 pages. It's very explanatory in terms of how we're approaching the questions. And I would strongly suggest that you print this out. And as you're working your way through the activities, you're having a look at how we do it to reach the correct answer. And as I said, that is going to guide you forward when you come to do the subsequent cases for which we haven't provided answers. The reason being is that there are universities around the world using these cases at the moment for assessment purposes, so we can't release the answers. But come to me if you do want the answers for any of the questions. Our Monday morning sessions will be focusing on different cases, and I will be revealing the answers very quietly to those who are interested. Okay, so that's an overview of what we have in the adult weight management case. Happy to sit with you for a while and answer questions, or we can have a look at anything else on the website that you would like to look at. I should just point out that the toolkit, if you didn't purchase a toolkit on our website, the toolkit that you'll be using is the toolkit for ready reckoners. When you do this is a resource that ties in with the activities and provides the information you need to answer the questions that we pose around this patient. Much of this information is in the Handbook of Nutrition and Dietetics, but there are some differences. For example, we don't provide the Institute of Medicine energy equation in the handbook. There are your Australian dietary guidelines. You will need that when you do a comparison of your patient's intake against the guidelines. And here are a series of ready reckoners. Now, these ready reckoners are slightly different to the ready reckoners in a handbook. And you can decide which ready reckoner you use for your nutrition analysis. You can use this one, or you can use the one in the handbook, or you can make up your own. In some academic programs, they require as part of your assessment to make up your own ready reckoner, which is a great exercise because it forces you to have a look at the kilojoule and calorie content of a large number of foods and then take an average in terms of food groups and generate your own resource. Whichever way you're going to go, you will find that your nutrition analysis will always be somewhere within 5 to 10% of the next person's, providing you're doing the correct calculations. So you can decide which ready reckoner you want to use. We've got carbohydrate exchanges here. This is very useful for your type 2 diabetes patient. We give you the 15-gram exchanges for a large range of foods, moving through all of the food groups. Glycemic index, glycemic load, energy and protein requirements for special states, and very importantly, information on counselling strategies. This section here we haven't looked at. This is information on the nutrition care process and terminology. It's actually a book chapter, and that's, reading might take maybe an hour to work your way through the chapter of that book, but it's a nice introduction to the nutrition care process and terminology. It frames it for you before you move forward into your case study. All right, so that's where we are at. Are you feeling okay, bamboozled?
No, that was really thorough and great. Thank you.
CD, any questions?
This is a little bit scary for me at this moment. I feel like,
Yeah, get so much information and stuff, like a lot to read.
There is a lot of reading, and I think part of that process is just learning the website. Once you understand how the website works, you'll be able to move in and out of information easily. There is a lot of information there, all very useful in preparing you for practice. It's just a question of taking the time to work through it. And as I said, I'm here to help you. So whatever you need, we are around.
And also, I got a question on getting access to it. I tried to register it, and then it asked me for the access code.
Okay. Are you able to have a look at Zini's?
I will log in and have a look at Zini's. Absolutely. I'll do that now for you.
Because what normally happens, what I think may have happened, is that one of us would have registered you for access to your cases. Maybe you would have received an email saying what your username and password is. Did you see that?
I can look up on my email to see whether I got that one or
It
not.
may have gone to junk mail or spam or something.
And it would have come from sales at australiandietitian.com.
Oh, okay. I'll look at it again, and then if I have any question, I probably will send an email through.
Okay, fabulous.
okay.
And I'll also check for you.
Thank you.
It might be quicker if we just send that email again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Lovely.
Mine also didn't come through when I tried to access the case studies.
Your email didn't come, your welcome email?
No, I wasn't able to access the case studies when I clicked onto those links. Nothing came through.
And had you gone in and registered, so you'd used your email address and the password that we gave you to register?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I did that now as well. I don't know.
This is really important information for us. Yeah.
Because I'm trying to register it, and then it asks me the access code, but there's nowhere I can find my access code.
Yeah.
And I looked up my emails. There's no access code. And I looked through all the packs, the books and, the flyers and brochures, and then there's nothing there.
Yeah, there is no access code.
Yeah,
the thing that you receive from us that will work is an email that gives you your username and password.
So when I actually register it now, I put on, it says like access code, and then I underneath that, it says I do not have a book or access code. So I actually ticked on that, and then probably I don't know, something will be sent to your end, and then you approve that. So after that, I'll see. That's what I can do now.
So can you do a search in your email boxes and just see if you've received?
Yeah.
And you've had nothing from sales at Australian Dietitian that hasn't come through?
No access code or anything.
You won't get an access code?
I only received 4 emails from you guys. One is a receipt, like all of them are the receipts and stuff.
Okay.
So there was no email with your user login as your email address, and then your password as welcome123. It would be maybe the second line into the email.
You have that, Alison?
I've got that. I had the welcome123, and I did get that, but I still wasn't able to get the cases didn't come down when I tried to click onto it. It said no access.
So you clicked on the tab that says cases, if Rowan can show you on, so you clicked there and you didn't see the cases that you were given access to, that you purchased.
Cases, but I couldn't access into them. So it wouldn't actually give me any more information. So I wondered whether going through this seminar with you, it might activate it as well. I wasn't sure.
I'm just going to show you. I'll go into our admin here. I'll go into members, and I'm going to bring you up, Alison.
Okay.
Alison and surname WAR.
BUITM.
Alison. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that you have access to these cases. And then if I go in and impersonate you, this is something that we do just to make sure that our users have access. So I'm now impersonating you, and I can see that you have these cases. So
but when I click on those cases, nothing comes up. Can you try clicking on them?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you click on that and it doesn't come up. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, so it's coming up with me, and I'm seeing exactly what you see. Is it possible for Alison to share her screen with us? I wonder.
Yes. Are you logged in now, Alison?
I'm trying to find out where I am. Sorry, I'm not really good with IT.
Okay, take your time.
Okay, I'll probably have everything come up now. No, I've got that. I mustn't be logged. I thought I was logged in. I'll just check this.
I'll just check Zini's.
No.